He is the key figure behind Huawei's comeback. Because of him, in just 3 years, we closed a 30-year technology gap in mainland China's chip industry. And it was also him who single-handedly pulled China's chip industry, which had struggled for 20 years despite national efforts, out of the mire and to the top of the world. To achieve all this, he was cornered by TSMC 3 times and even threatened repeatedly by Chen Shui-bian. But in the end, he fulfilled his father's wish and built China's very own chip industry. He is China's god of semiconductors, Richard Chang, the man who, by his own strength, dragged China's chip industry from the depths and led it to glory. Richard Chang was born in Nanjing in 1948. His father, Zhang Shilun, was one of China's most renowned steel experts. During the war, he and his wife Liu Peijin built the 21st Arsenal. This factory was responsible for producing 90% of the country's heavy machine guns during the war. In 1949, Zhang Shilun took the infant Richard Chang and moved to Taiwan. After graduating from National Taiwan University, Richard Chang went to the United States to pursue a master's in engineering and a doctorate in electronics. In 1977, Richard Chang joined Texas Instruments and thus began his legendary journey. At the time, Texas Instruments was known as the titan of the global chip industry. Nearly all the top minds in chip technology were gathered at this company. And it was in this environment that Richard Chang was able to grow rapidly. Here he met 2 important mentors. The first was the Nobel Prize laureate in physics and the inventor of the integrated circuit, Jack Kilby. After joining Texas Instruments, Richard Chang joined Kilby's team, so he witnessed the birth of the chip from conception. The second was Dr. Xiao Zifan, a leading expert in chip plant construction. Xiao Zifan, Chinese, held Richard Chang in high regard. Under Xiao's mentorship, Richard Chang built over 10 large chip factories. This is how Richard Chang earned reputation as factory-building fanatic. In the 1990s, when Zhang Shilun spoke with his son, he would often ask when Richard Chang would return to mainland China to build chip factories. His father's wish became deeply rooted in Richard Chang's heart. In 1997, inspired by Zhang Shilun and Xiao Zifan, Richard Chang decided to retire early and return to China to build factories. In the 50s and 60s, China could still compete with the West in semiconductor technology. But after reform and opening up, it showed Western technology had surpassed China. In 1977, semiconductor leader Wang Shouwu spoke at a science and technology symposium. China had over 600 semiconductor factories, but their total annual integrated circuit output was 1/10 the monthly output of a single large Japanese factory. His words were a shocking wake-up call. The state then organized 3 major chip campaigns: the 531 strategy in 1986, the 908 project in Wuxi in 1990, and the 909 project in Shanghai in 1995. However, all 3 suffered heavy setbacks. The only survivors were Wuxi Huajing, Shanghai Belling, Shanghai Philips, and Shanghai Huahong. After returning to China, Richard Chang first went to Wuxi Huajing, which had been operating at a loss. As fire chief, Richard Chang made Huajing profitable in just half a year. But Richard Chang also saw that because the mainland lagged for so long, it lacked talent and equipment. The timing wasn't right to build a factory there, so he chose a roundabout path to save the nation. In 1997, Richard Chang founded WSMC. In just 2 years, he built 2 chip factories in Taiwan. Within 3 years, worldwide's production capacity was over a third of TSMC's. How could anyone tolerate another sleeping soundly in their own bed, especially since TSMC's leader, Morris Chang, and Richard Chang came from the same place? He knew exactly what Richard Chang could do. As the king of Taiwan's semiconductor industry, he couldn't allow anyone to challenge his throne. At that time, Richard Chang had his own plans. He planned to first build 2 chip factories in Taiwan, with the 3rd through the 10th factories all to be located in mainland China. Just as Richard Chang was preparing to execute his grand plan, Morris Chang approached him with an offer to acquire WSMC. Richard Chang immediately rejected the proposal, but Morris Chang was determined. He offered 8.5 times the value, using $5 billion to buy WSMC, which was worth $600 million then. With Morris Chang's tempting offer, worldwide's shareholders turned against him. While Richard Chang was away on business, they quickly sold the company to Morris Chang. When he heard, Richard Chang was helpless, but he made one condition: the 3rd factory still had to be built in mainland China. Morris Chang agreed to the condition, but the question was when it would be built. Richard Chang reminded him repeatedly, but Morris Chang kept making excuses. Richard Chang realized Morris Chang was just playing for time. While Morris Chang could wait, mainland China's chip industry could not, so Richard Chang submitted his resignation. When Morris Chang saw the resignation letter, he told Richard Chang the consequences of leaving. "You can go," he said, "but you can't take the TSMC shares we promised you when we acquired Worldwide." Richard Chang simply replied with 4 words: "I don't want them." At that time, he had many options. He could go to Hong Kong or to Wuxi, but Shanghai, however, was not on the list. At the time, Hong Kong was excited about Richard Lee's cyberport. But after investigating, Richard Chang found Lee was just using it to speculate on real estate, with no plan to build a real business. After the failure of the 908 and 909 projects, Wuxi became wary of semiconductors again. It was at this moment that Shanghai extended an olive branch. There was an old saying, "Shanghai doesn't believe in the internet." At the start of the century, of the three internet giants, Baidu was in Beijing, Tencent in Shenzhen, and Alibaba in Hangzhou. Jack Ma had first chosen Shanghai as his base, but at the time no one there believed in him, so he couldn't get support or recruit talent. He had no choice but to return to his hometown Hangzhou to start his business. For a long time, as a financial center, Shanghai's most famous internet company was just the dating site Jiayuan. So, having learned its lesson, Shanghai decided to focus on real industries. But their first harvest was a massive fraud, elaborately packaged as the Hangxin #1 chip. This made Shanghai a laughingstock in the global chip industry. This time, when they heard that Richard Chang was planning to build a semiconductor factory in the mainland, Zhang Shangzhou, who was in charge of the chip industry, found Richard Chang. When Richard Chang visited Shanghai to inspect, the city's four main leadership bodies all came to receive him. Even the mayor, Xu Guangdi, personally accompanied him. The site for the chip factory was set in Zhangjiang, Pudong. With SMIC's arrival, the Zhangjiang High-Tech Park brand began to shine. Richard Chang, carrying the dream of building China's #1 core chip factory, named the company SMIC. And he not only brought his wife and children, but he even brought his 90-year-old mother to Shanghai. On August 24, 2000, SMIC broke ground. 396 days later, SMIC began trial production. But building a world-class chip factory is much harder than most people think. Otherwise, even with the country's full effort and tens of billions of RMB, success would have come. Richard Chang needed more than money. He needed talent, technology, and equipment. Money was the easy part. With mainland market backing and Richard Chang's reputation and connections, he raised $1 billion in a year. The people problem was also easy. When Richard Chang came to Shanghai, he brought 300 former subordinates from worldwide. But this number of technical personnel was far from meeting SMIC's needs. Richard Chang still needed to recruit more. The hardest part was technology and equipment. After the Cold War, Western countries led by the US signed the Wassenaar Arrangement, restricting exports of goods and technologies like advanced materials, electronics, and military items. China is one of the countries subject to these bans. If China imports equipment, by agreement, it must follow an N-2 strategy, meaning only tech 2 generations old. In chip production, after approval, construction, and tech absorption, production is already at least 3 generations behind. The Wuxi 909 project failed for this reason. Richard Chang leveraged his role in the American church to gain support from 5 major church organizations, who collectively endorsed him and guaranteed SMIC's technology would not be used for military purposes. With their backing, he convinced key US government departments, including State, Commerce, Energy, and Defense, and secured process technologies from 0.18 to 0.13 microns. While in the US, Richard Chang traveled between coasts, urging Chinese chip experts to return to China. He convinced over 100 to go back and contribute. To attract more overseas talent and Chinese nationals to return, Richard Chang built an integrated SMIC international school near the factory from kindergarten to high school and funded 1,500 housing units for SMIC employees. With money, people, technology, and equipment ready, Richard Chang unleashed his factory-building frenzy. He switched to 10 times speed. In 3 years, he built 6 chip factories, launching 4 8-inch and 1 12-inch production lines. This was the first time he, through his own efforts, elevated China's chip technology from the micron level to the nanometer level. He even propelled SMIC to the position of the world's 3rd largest chip foundry. In just 3 years, Richard Chang created a semiconductor industry for mainland China, something our nation couldn't achieve after 20 years and all its resources. No wonder people said one Richard Chang was worth a national project. Once, friends from Taiwan came to the mainland to visit Richard Chang and went back to tell the Taiwanese media, Richard doesn't even wear a suit, just a work shirt with an old grey sweater over it, like a missionary. His desk is a cheap piece made from plywood. Zhang said he has a grand dream for China's semiconductor industry. He wants to fully dedicate himself to this dream, even willing to sacrifice his life. This man isn't doing this to make money. That's what's most terrifying. The facts prove it. Richard Chang treated SMIC as his child. Early in construction, he inspected the factory several times a day. On the first day of operation, he led senior executives to kneel in the clean room and wipe the floor with alcohol. He controlled huge sums but only flew economy on business trips. On the day the factory was completed and began production, Richard Chang spent 20 yuan of his own money to buy a 1,000-shot string of firecrackers. He hung them on the main beam of the factory building and set them off. He had waited over a decade for this moment, and in this moment he also fulfilled his parents' wish of several decades. In 2003, SMIC's revenue was $365 million. In 2004, revenue reached $975 million. Although this performance was still behind the industry leader, a nearly 3-fold annual revenue growth made it the chip company with the most growth potential. But Zhang Rujing could never have imagined that a plot to kill him had already been set up. Zhang Rujing's actions in mainland China attracted Taiwan's attention. To stop him from developing the chip industry there, Taiwan fined him 15 million new Taiwan dollars over 3 occasions. Later, they issued an arrest warrant for Zhang Rujing, forcing him to give up his Taiwanese identity. Unlike the Taiwanese authorities who antagonized Zhang Rujing, the shrewd and calculating Zhang Zhongmu waited for his chance. He secretly observed and gathered evidence to deliver a fatal blow to SMIC and Zhang Rujing. In 2003, just 3 days before SMIC was to list in Hong Kong, TSMC launched a blitz in California, suing SMIC for patent infringement and demanding hundreds of millions in damages. At that time, SMIC's revenue was only at $365 million. It was normal for the 310 key personnel Chang brought to follow Shida University's work methods and processes, but this habit sowed the seeds of the lawsuit. If methods and processes are the same, and products are very similar, it's hard to explain the differences. TSMC seized on this point because regardless of whether they win or lose the lawsuit, it will affect SMIC's normal development pace. The lawsuit dragged on for 2 years, leaving Chang exhausted, and he ultimately chose to settle out of court. The settlement amounted to $100 million to be repaid over 6 years. However, at this time, the lawyer hired by Chang was unprofessional, which left SMIC with a fatal mistake. Under the settlement agreement, SMIC must set up a third-party escrow account for TSMC over 6 years, and SMIC must deposit all of its technology into this account for TSMC to inspect during these 6 years. This is equivalent to SMIC standing naked in front of its competitors for the next 6 years. This opened the back door for TSMC's second attempt to strangle it. Despite this setback, SMIC's development remains unstoppable. After a breakthrough in 45nm technology, SMIC prepared to go public again to raise funds. At this time, TSMC again sued SMIC for violating the settlement agreement, claiming SMIC's 13nm process used TSMC's technology. The lawsuit lasted another 3 years. This time, SMIC fought back directly, but the result was a crushing defeat. Their loss not only means they will have to pay an additional $200 million in damages, but also give up an extra 10% of their shares. When Chang heard the news, he burst into tears. In 2009, SMIC first faced the bankruptcy of its major customer, Qimonda, resulting in a sharp decline in revenue and a huge loss of $960 million. Then it suffered a huge compensation loss in a lawsuit, and SMIC reached its darkest moment. Moreover, after winning the lawsuit, Zhang Zhongmu added a condition: Zhang Rujing must leave SMIC. Zhang Rujing was very clear that Zhang Zhongmu was targeting him. If his departure could save SMIC, then he would choose to leave. 3 days after losing the case, Zhang Rujing left SMIC, but Zhang Zhongmu did not let him off the hook. A 3-year non-compete agreement was placed in front of Zhang Rujing. That day, Zhang Rujing walked around the factory area several times again. That day, he said 3 words to his colleagues who came to see him off: "Don't fall down." On that day, Taiwanese media wrote triumphantly, "We have now gained control of half of the mainland's chip industry." The signing of the non-compete agreement seems to signal the end of Zhang Rujing's semiconductor career, especially for a 62-year-old man who should be retiring. But Zhang Rujing is like the fisherman in The Old Man and the Sea. You can destroy him, but you can never defeat him. After a 2-month break, he turned around and started his factory-building maniac channel again. He invested in 4 LED companies in China. These companies span the entire LED industry, from upstream substrate materials and chips to downstream lighting applications, with a total investment of over 3.5 billion yuan. But Richard Chang did not stay away from chips for long. In June 2014, when his non-compete expired, Richard Chang entered the large silicon wafer sector. He founded Shanghai Xinsheng Technology, vowing to conquer the technological high ground. You see, chip development depends on silicon wafers, and the trend for wafers is toward higher purity and larger sizes. The purer and larger the wafer, the more chips can be cut from it, lowering the cost per chip. Previously, large silicon wafer technology was controlled by Japan, Germany, South Korea, and Taiwan. They would only sell products, keeping the technology. In this situation, we would lose bargaining power. If they joined forces to block large wafer supply, semiconductor costs would rise sharply. This time, Richard Chang entered the large silicon wafer sector. In 2 years, Xinsheng produced the mainland's first 300mm single crystal silicon ingot, then achieved mass production of 300mm semiconductor silicon wafers. Under the same process, the usable area of a 300mm wafer is more than double that of a 200mm wafer. Chips in high-end fields like smartphones and cloud computing come from 300mm wafers. After conquering large silicon wafers, Xinsheng Technology quickly expanded its success. By 2019, Xinsheng Technology reached a monthly production capacity of 150,000 wafers. This brought a breakthrough for our country's large silicon wafer production. It was the second time Richard Chang filled the technological gap in our country's large silicon wafers. However, after Xinsheng Technology had seized the high ground, Richard Chang resigned again in 2017. This time, at 69 years old, Richard Chang still didn't choose to retire. He once again charged into battle, heading north to Qingdao, and plunged into the technological high ground of IDM. In the chip industry, there are 3 models: IDM, design, and foundry. Huawei's HiSilicon and Qualcomm are typical design companies. They only design, they don't manufacture. SMIC and TSMC are typical foundry companies, and IDM is a combination of the two. The reason for choosing IDM is that once this model is mastered, our country will no longer be held back by others in the chip sector. In fact, back when Richard Chang was working at Texas Instruments, he had considered choosing the IDM model for building factories after returning to China. But when SMIC was founded, the timing wasn't right. because IDM requires a large number of design talents to support it. But at that time, there were no more than 5 chip design companies in mainland China, and the talent gap was huge. That's why he chose to start with the foundry model first. Now, 17 years have passed. Richard Chang planned to return to his original intention, but the domestic design talent gap still exists. Take Intel, for example. As the world's largest IDM company, Intel's R&D team exceeds several thousand people. To address this, Richard Chang creatively pioneered a shared IDM method, known as CIDM. The strategy is to bring in 30 to 40 design companies. Through cross-shareholding, he could indirectly gain a design team of 3,000 to 4,000 people. In May 2018, Cyan Integrated Circuits Embodies with a total investment of $15 billion, held its signing ceremony. In August 2021, the 8-inch fab started production and the photomask factory delivered products at the same time. In Q3 that year, the 12-inch mature process began production. This was the third time Richard Chang, through his own efforts, solved our country's technical challenges in chip design and production. In 2021, at 73, Richard Chang took on a new challenge at Shanghai Jita Semiconductor, aiming to solve China's chip shortage in the new energy vehicle sector. With the rapid development of our country's auto industry, especially new energy vehicles, the shortage of automotive chips has quickly increased. This is especially true for high-end microcontroller chips, where our country is importing heavily. Solving the automotive-grade chip issue is urgent, and Jita Semiconductor was founded precisely to solve this problem. Richard Chang, who came from SMIC, started 3 businesses. Each venture lasted for 3 years. Looking back at Richard Chang's ventures, we can feel his faith and persistence in China's chip industry. With every investment, he threw himself into the most critical parts of the chip industry chain. This do-or-die spirit holds his faith in chips, love for his country, and the hopes his parents and mentor entrusted to him. 30 years ago, when Richard Chang was at Texas Instruments, Dr. Xiao Zifan also took him around the world to build factories. They left their footprints in Japan, Italy, Singapore, and Taiwan. And the time they spent building each factory was also exactly 3 years. Today, Richard Chang carries his faith and responsibility. Like a sower, he gives his all, scattering seeds upon the fertile soil of his homeland. Before August 29, 2023, China's chip industry faced a dark time. Huawei was suppressed, SMIC investigated, and Oppo's chip division shut down. But this intense pressure showed us the need for chip independence. We realized the chip industry is a towering peak, steep with a difficult, treacherous path. But we never lost the confidence to reach the summit. This confidence doesn't come from blindness. It's because we know that in some corner of our country, there is a group of lonely heroes, carrying their faith and shouldering their responsibilities. Even if their hair turns grey, even if they are ground to dust, they will persistently climb toward the summit of the world. And Richard Chang is the most persistent one among them.